So I am ever so slowly waking up. It's been taking me like 5 sleeping pills just to get to sleep every night. And my mornings are groggy. But what are we doing these days? So I don't post much on this channel. It's definitely something that I need to do more often. But I got this TRX. It was given to me by way of my uncle passing away. He had bought a TRX. I think he thought he was going to see me at some point. And then probably ended up realizing he wasn't going to see me. And so there's like this unopened TRX, brand new. And I'm seeing they sell for the same amount of money that they sold for 10, 15 years ago when I was buying them. And I've owned a lot of TRX. And all the exercises are just coming right back to me. Fitness is coming right back to me. Slowly working in, realizing what I'm going to need to take in that is going to fuel my workouts. So I tried dabbling with, when I say dabbling, I'm right now as I record this, I'm doing my indoor walking. Probably walked 1,600 miles altogether indoor alone. That might even be shy of the actual numbers. I'm not recording anymore because I got rid of my iPhone, and the Samsung just doesn't have good fitness recording app. So I might go on Strava, but I don't think Strava actually measures correctly these distances where I'm doing 10 steps one way, 10 steps the other way. And it doesn't get monotonous. In fact, I've talked about this. It really does work. I think you have to have an area where you have at least 10 spaces though. And I'm not feeling like super electrically charged right now. In fact, if anything, my body is kind of feeling like, holy crap, you put me through a lot. I got to go through this repair cycle in order to get back, So that's what the walking's all about. It just helps you ease into oxidative exercise, right? That's going to get you burning fat. So I noticed that I'm burning a lot of intramuscular fat, organ fat. Gluconeogenesis working combatively with ketosis is really amazing. You're going to burn off all the tough areas that you don't burn properly with ketosis. So flitting between gluconeogenesis and ketosis is not hard to do, but it does take a high amount of exercise, right? And then the intensity, like yesterday, once I was tired doing core exercises and repeat exercises, I added in jump squats to my walking, right? So I'm that higher level peak heart rate and higher output, and really getting this systemic blood flow is the most important, most crucial. But yeah, I am really out of it. I'm on my second cup of tea. I got off coffee. In fact, I want to see if my son can take back this expensive coffee machine and possibly get some store credit. It might be way too late. I think he got it for me. Oh no, this is the third one, so it might actually, he might be able to do that. I'm gonna see if he can. It's like one of those ninja $200, whipping station and all this stuff, and I don't need any of that. In fact, I'm completely off coffee, and it's taken many years. And I believe that coffee is behind a lot of the premature gray hair, leaching copper out of your system. And I think it's just the opposite of what we need to be taking in, right? But to me, I see the need to do vegetable loads, right? 1 to 2 times a month, organic, just vegetables alone, no rice, no lentils, no beans, cooked in a variety of fat, from coconut oil, MCT type oils, flax, right? And you could even throw some eggs in with that. I mean, that's kind of disgusting, but you could put it on the side, right? High omega-3 eggs. So that's what I'm doing. That's interesting. Is that I'm doing all day exercise, and you're going to burn more subcutaneous fat, right? Doing the ketogenic, specifically carnivore diet, works the best out of all of them. And then to get rid of the inner organ, intramuscular fat, the liver fat, right? That's the most important thing, to get rid of that fatty liver going into gluconeogenesis and around your heart and so forth. Most people who are on a ketogenic diet do not feel good nor want to do just all protein. So I'm doing both, but it does take time to, like, you really have to take in a pretty big fat bomb. So when you're in gluconeogenesis, and I posted some information up about this, because the amino acids are spiking your insulin, right? Because your body is, going into gluconeogenesis and relying on, for lack of going in depth with it, carbon skeletons for ATP production, your body goes into an entire different mode, but you're not aiding yourself in fat adaptation, right? When you're in gluconeogenesis. So the first meal obviously is going to be a high protein one, but you want to make sure that it's also a high fat one. So like last night, after being 2 days on gluconeogenesis, which I wasn't in there for 2 days, right? Even with the high volume training, it probably took me about 24 hours to get in there. So I was really only in gluconeogenesis for about 24 hours. And then I started to go into ketosis, which is what I'm in right now. And so there's a shorter period of time as opposed to taking in carbohydrates, where I could go toward G&G or ketosis. G&G does not feel healthy to people until you get into the fact that G&G has a very bad name attached to it. But I think that gluconeogenesis is the key to cancer treatment, right? I think it's the key to many things, but I don't think you could just go in, like you're using alanine and glutamine and several other amino acids first. So when you cut out the fat and you don't have any carbohydrates in your system, which I don't, so that's the beauty of just going through those two metabolic states. When you take in carbohydrates, it's like you just feel it. You come to a screeching halt. That's a little bit how I feel right now, but I feel myself sinking into ketosis. But you're not building up those ketone bodies. And I put down what those specific ketone bodies are, right? So your body's confused. When your body's confused, it's going to do one of two things. And it really depends on your metabolism, your training, and I think genetics to a large extent. Is you're either going to, and your age, obviously, any metabolic conditions you may have. But I think that when you're going between gluconeogenesis and ketosis, and mind you, I'm talking about it takes days. You're not saying that you can just primarily go from one to the other with ease and it just happens instantaneously. I would say by doing this and exercising these gears, we'll call them, you could probably switch from one state to the other within like a 15-hour period. I would just put that sort of moniker on it. It may happen sooner. It may happen later. So I would say 15 hours as a general. And so that's where, if you're going into ketosis, you really need to do diligence and take in a high-fat meal. That's why I like to do things like bacon, cooking with butter, right? Having the olive oil around. And so my next, it's so bizarre, like my entire list can change from pretty much predominantly all vegetables and a variety of different vegetables, and it can switch to not one vegetable and just hamburger patties. And I'm gonna splurge most of the money that I have on benefits on all ketogenic carnivore. You know, it worked for me in the past. This is the crazy thing, is that G&G, I can train better when I've been in gluconeogenesis and I'm just on protein powder and just like I show, taking in, you know, lean, which obviously still, even with ultra lean, boneless, skinless chicken breast, you're getting in some fat, especially when you buy it from Walmart, right? But you're gonna have a little ketosis going on there, right? G&G's got to be driven. So if you're not exercising, and even more so, your body will trick you. Like that's why David Goggins is so popular, right? It's that he realizes that he's got a hobble. Your body will cause pain in areas, and then not until you get that systemic blood flow going, and especially to your brain, you begin to realize how deceptive your body can be, right? Like, oh, my knees feel better when I'm moving. Oh, you know, this area that aches feels better. So I enjoy these walks where I'm actually, you know, feel like I've reached some sort of stasis, right? Where it's like I get this pleasantry of, okay, you're doing the right thing. I see the signs. You're going in the right direction. There's no obstacles particularly in your way, and you're going to be able to do this for a prolonged period of time. And then there's that sort of imagine where this is going to take you with the results you're getting right now. So predominantly that is the thing that I'm doing different, is that the hardest part is when you get super lean like I did, and I got to the point where, admittedly, what went wrong last time with my carnivore diet and why I was getting so sickly. Like, sure, I was 150 pounds and had a little over 150 pounds and had a very small waist and was relatively lean, but I still had fat in areas around my side boob area, and then even around the waist a little bit, but not that much, right? But the reason that I felt sickly and the reason I was having those issues had to do with low quality foods. If you notice, I was on the go and I had to buy those eggs from fast food. And then there's also that news coming out about McDonald's, right? Like when they talk about all these hundreds of millions of hamburgers, and you start to think about it and you realize, you go, yeah, there's no way they can like grow a full grown cow that quickly. Like, can you imagine how much waste and how much feed? Like, there's no way McDonald's isn't using globally, right? That they're not somehow shipping this in from another country or doing this through backdoor mechanism. Like, yeah, they're all beef, but was the beef actually like, okay, and it was a living cells, but was it actually a cow? You know, you begin to ask this about all fast food restaurants. This was something that was talked about 20, 30 years ago, maybe even longer back. And so they'd been developing this type of thing, but now it's actually legal, you know. And of course they make it seem really benign, like because they focus in on fish, right? And now then they focused in on chicken, and now they're focusing in on beef. So it's hard to say where the meat even comes from. But when I got away from those shack burgers, those shack burgers were real beef. We begin to forget what real beef even tastes like, you know. And when we start to taste that real beef, that fatty beef, you realize you're going, this tastes nothing like the hamburgers that I get from Walmart, or, you know, and there's just packed with hormones. And I think that's what happened, is that I was eating all those fillers. I wasn't getting enough nutrition. I was invariably starving myself. And I have a lot of discipline. And as the months go by, there's something in your body that just breaks. It's not your free will. Your body will begin to trick you. It's like, I have to get calories. I'm starving. And you're watching your weight drop and watching your muscle mass drop. And then inactivity from working all day, sitting in a car all day long, that backs up on you, you know. You change mentally, you change physically. And when you really do have a lot of discipline and you apply free will, it can work against you, because you think you're doing everything that you need to do. You know you're not getting everything you need, right? But you only have so many resources available to you. And so you do the best you can, and the best is never good enough. So do I think carnivore can work when you're on the road all the time, stopping at fast food restaurants? I proved that it doesn't. And when I first got off of that, where I couldn't work anymore, I was like, I literally just couldn't work. You know, I went and just abruptly changed everything. And a month went by and I'm pretty much in bed. And then another month went by and I'm going, what the fuck's wrong with me, right? And I still was on carnivore, right? And I ended up going, I'm not healing back. I'm not getting the nutrition that my body needs. What's going on here, right? And so I had to change things up. I had to start putting on some body fat. I knew that. Instinctively, I knew that I just needed to get in all the calories that I could and do a reset. As hard as that was, as hard as I'd worked, right? I wasn't then exercising, wasn't able to exercise. I was in severe fatigue. I'd already been through severe PTSD and many other things, experienced cognitive dissonance, and went through very hard trial periods over and over and over again. And you have to make cortisol work for you, you know? And there's a point where all the stress, all the people that produce stress and create stress in your life, you'll become allergic to them and any foods that you just can't tolerate anymore. So I allowed myself to eat essentially what I wanted for some months before I started to feel like I was healthy enough. Several months, at least 3 or 4 months of just eating what I wanted, right? What I wanted when I wanted. And it was a variety of different things, and it still wasn't healthy food, but it was, there were ample calories, you know? And then slowly I started to realize, okay, my weight's back up. I'm feeling pretty good. And you'd be amazed at how quickly you can gain weight when you're not moving. And the reason my body wasn't moving is because it couldn't move. I was in a state of declining health, you know? And I do think that I was getting also electrically poisoned. But I think that our body's defenses might be able to fight that off better when our immune systems are strong and so forth. my immune system was just shot, you know. If I had the money to go take my blood profiles and have tests, I probably would have come back with something where they thought I was terminal. I'm glad that I don't go to a doctor for that specific purpose, and I don't and I won't. So I got back into training high volume walking just some weeks ago. I tried to go back in when I first got back down to the Monterey Bay area. I stuck on it, you know. I was trying to just jump right back into it. Now in hindsight, I could have done it different. My body's reaction was to sort of recoil and put on a bunch of weight. But I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to lose all the fat that I was putting on, right, in a healthy way without going back into ketosis specifically. There are ways you can go into ketosis where you are eating things like mushrooms, you know, where you're taking in a little bit more carbohydrates, but you really have to scientifically put your diet together, and you need to add in variety. You know, you're looking at the glycemic index of things. That's the healthiest way. But do you do it from the top or the bottom, right? And what I find is it's much healthier to do it from the top. In other words, you're already fit. You're starting to get the resources. Things are building up. Now I need to figure out what I'm missing in my diet and start adding in small amounts of this food or that food, you know. Like I do think that the mushroom is an amazing, life-giving, life-preserving form of nutrition that is being offered to us, right? I read the book The Magic Mushroom by Allegra, and you know, I don't get into it that much, but yeah, I do see the significance to that. I do. And I think from a scientific sense, there's a very good reason why. Like I just read an article about this American-Russian scientist that was arrested for smuggling frog embryos into the U.S. Of course, she's just trying to do research, you know. And who knows? Maybe she was doing it for Michael Levin, you know. Maybe she was doing some peer-reviewed things that would end up not directly for Michael Levin, but things that would be peer-reviewed, right, and able to assist in the geography of what's taking place there with, you know, the bullfrog embryos and so forth. And hopefully, you know, they're not going to be throwing the book at her, because it sucks that a scientist couldn't bring in things that they need to bring in without having to do all this paperwork and being forbidden to really use their laboratories, you know, where they can do the type of research that needs to be done. We need to take that a lot more seriously, but we got this bonehead for a president, so that's not going to help much at all. Let's see. Yeah, so gluconeogenesis, ketosis. So you want to be sure that you're taking in vitamin D for your liver, right? You can get this with high quality eggs, or a lot of eggs if they're not so high quality. I'm going to be ordering a flat of 60 from Walmart. I know that's not the best place to get them, but that's really what I'm left with, you know. And my way of getting rid of the toxicity, my way of covering up for the lack of nutrients is supplements. I very much believe. So what's brought me back is the Orthomolecular Linus Pauling old school method of high dose vitamin C. And I can tell, and I was doing high dose D, but ran out of the D3. And so when I can, I'm going to be adding as many supplements as I can back in. I take several multivitamins every day to ensure that I'm getting enough nutrition. And it has slowly brought up my longevity and my ability to endure more and to do more, right? And that's invariably, I mean, the full effect is what I'm feeling right now. But my body fat's very high, right? What happens with gluconeogenesis is you end up getting this really hardcore, fit, lean body, but it takes quite a while if you're just doing gluconeogenesis to actually burn off those layers of fat, particularly around your waist. Where the adverse is your waist shrinks up in on carnivore, right? When you're exclusively on carnivore. So that's what I'm going to be doing this month. I didn't think I was going to do that, but I'm going to order. So I'm only eating like the Walmart brand stuff as a backup. I'm going to try to get about, just for money purposes, economic purposes, I'm going to try to get through about 2 weeks of just the highest quality foods that aren't a Walmart brands at all, you know. High quality eggs, high omega-3 eggs, really high quality beef, right? And then I'll be slipping in more toward my backup reserves so that I know I have enough. And that's when I think I'm gonna be doing carnivore all month. And so when I say that, it seems like I'd be able to stick on carnivore for about 3 months. And then my remedy, what I'll be going into, being that I have enough nutrition and enough nutritional support, right? Enough calories, enough supplements, enough vitamin C, enough vitamin D, enough magnesium. I'm really going to try to promote my magnesium levels, right? And that's the most important thing. But after I strip away all that fat and I build up my muscle training with TRX every single day, right? I'm going to then start to play more with gluconeogenesis and ketosis, right? When my body weight's dropping, I'm going to be bolstering with vegetables, right? A couple times a month, like doing super compensation, where I deplete so severely on gluconeogenesis for like 5 days, right? To where there's 0 carbs in my system at all. And then I suddenly introduce really high quality myriad of different vegetables and fruits to my system with nothing else, right? And just staying away from any carbs besides vegetables at that point. And only using that to sort of bolster my weight loss, right? To where I can keep getting leaner and I can keep aiding and adding to the fascia and the collagen production, right? So something I'm not going to back off of is vitamin C. And I do realize that vitamin C does cause people to hold water. I think, you know, with ketosis, particularly carnivore, where you have to take in more salt, right? You have to take in the sodium. It's entirely necessary. Your body craves it, right? And you know, I'm also taking in electrolytes. I have that electrolyte mix, so I'm getting in my potassium and so forth, and along with some other minerals, very important minerals. But I noticed you can't just buy the colloidal minerals anymore, which is disheartening, right? I think people were abusing it and taking too many minerals in, and it was toxifying people's systems. And what I always told people back in the day was, don't take it like they tell you. Just take 5 or 10 drops here and there. You know, I'd put like 5 drops in my coffee, right? I would just constantly try to back myself up with the minerals, you know, the full spectrum minerals. There's something like Mineral Research Group had something like 72 plus minerals in their full pack, you know, they produced from the salt mines of Utah for a long period of time. I don't see it out there. I've looked. They split it all up, you know. The colloidal silver became a novelty, and then they started to split it up to where you really don't see those full spectrum mineral supplements anymore, because you really can over toxify if you're doing it according to the directions. You take it in 40 or 50 drops. Your body doesn't need that much all the time. Now, if you were to take in 40 or 50 drops, 5 drops at a time, and just slowly assimilate it in, right? But then they didn't have a good mechanism. They didn't have a good bottle. My bottles would always break, like the top would always break. And then they tried to remedy that by coming out with like more of a dropper type, smaller, you know, that you would carry around. It becomes very cumbersome to try and do it correctly, especially if you're on the road, you know, and you're moving around. Like many times those bottles would just spill out, and then I'd have, you know, an issue with these spilled out minerals and a loss of these expensive, because they've always been very expensive. You know, it costs a lot to produce them. So anyway, this I probably won't be putting up. What is it today? It's June 1st, 2025. The good thing is that I'm walking and it looks like I can at least get through a full day of walking. Now, if I say that, then I know, okay, I've got the energy to do a few TRX exercises, right? Focusing on some areas that I didn't hit the day prior. Well, when I do that with TRX, I realize, well, I don't have to be at this angle that where I'm using the brunt of my body weight. I can change angles, and then pretty soon I'm just right back in it, training full force before I know it. So that's kind of how my days are and always have been with my relationship with TRX and suspension training. Is without that one modality, I really can't effectively get a good exercise program going. It is so essential. I never realized that, how necessary it was in my daily exercise routine, that years could go by and I wouldn't exercise if I didn't have a TRX. Like that was the one selling point with 24-hour fitness, where they had TRX just hanging there. And I found myself going back to the TRX and not even using the fancy machines, right? You don't even really need to use those machines. The machines put you at an odd angle. Everybody's sitting on them. They're all sucking their cheeks in. The real workout is going to be on that pull-up bar, right? It's going to be where the dumbbell rack is and where the TRX are hanging. That if you're not touching it, nobody's touching it. When people look over at you and they see you doing it, suddenly everybody's interested in it, you know? So it's really great to have an area, and I have realized that I have an entire area where I can use the TRX. It's hanging from a pull-up bar. It's perfect. It's like I can do all the exercises that I need to do. I might be limited from doing a few exercises that are much more ballistically inclined, but jumping is a great exercise, and it's something like jump squats will keep most people, unless you have any preconditions with your knee and so forth where you can't do that, well, don't push it, right? But I've introduced jump squats back in, and you absolutely do not need to be doing 400 and 500 pound squats where you're loading all that weight on your back. It becomes a question of speed at that point, right? If you can produce and then keeping some mass on your upper body, it's a great modality to build your lower body. You're using force and speed and gravity. And it's amazing. Doing the jump squats, really, you can build amazing lower body development with that one exercise, depending on how far you push it. And then the single leg TRX squat is a great supplement to that, right? And then doing the TRX hamstring curl feels like you're doing nothing for your hamstrings, right? Because you're stabilizing with your spinalis and your recte spinae and so forth through your back, right? And your gluteus maximus, as well as your gluteus minimus, as you're going through the movement. And then of course your calves are involved too, mostly your soleus, right? Popliteal plantaris just behind your knee. So you're really getting in, and your core is involved because you're in a plank position. So you're supinated, your feet are in the TRX, right, on the bottom straps, and you're now going in, you're thrusting your hips off the ground. Typically you would have your hands down by your side to anchor and support you. And you're keeping your butt off the mat. In fact, you're trying to tilt your hips up to a plank position, and then you go into the curl, right? The butt kicker. You're bringing your heels to your butt. And that ends up being a really good exercise. You're not using a lot of resistive force, right? But it's a good supplemental exercise for hamstrings. Mainly it's a motor muscle movement to where you're really challenging that movement altogether, to where if you add in other hamstring type exercises, like I like to do a walking farmer's carry deadlift, where I'll be looking down, right? Say I'm holding 2 kettlebells, and I'm looking down and I'm getting a lower back stretch, and then I look up toward the ceiling as high as I can to innervate all my back muscles, right? So that I'm not just using my lower back as I anchor through. And all those muscles are innervating while you're exhaling and coming back up. And then you take another step. That's a great stretch for your hamstring, and it's a great way to work your hamstring. And as you're stepping forward, right, you're obviously going to get this staggered support through, you know, the adductors are going to be involved. I would say it's a really good preliminary pillar exercise, right? So anyway, I'm going to call this one a live stream, and it is not live. I'm just putting it up to sort of document what I'm doing. Maybe I'll put it up later, depending on the success of the channel, if I'm ever able to actually pull all this together and do it. But I've got all the resources. The TRX has got me on cloud 9. The fact that I can hang on to my phone, most likely, I'm not going to jump ahead for another month or two, is amazing. And you know, I'm in a mad rush to get my fitness levels back up and feel like I have all the nutrients that I require. I mean, we could always use a little more of something, right? And I do believe that when I'm eating bacon, eggs, and cheese, and heavy cream, I feel not only sustained, but I feel adequately fed, you know, knowing that I can eat any amount that I want. I think maybe an HCI type supplement for acid reflux might be a good idea at some points, but you know, that's subjective. I could see how not spiking your insulin with a full spectrum protein powder, right? But to supplement with things like glutamine might be beneficial for the gut health, brain health, you know, overall. But I could also see how you could be, from the most recent studies, you could be creating an atmosphere for cancer growth, right? So the ketogenic diet is linked directly to fighting cancer now, you know, and even more so suppressing glutamine uptake is a main component there, because your cancer cells can thrive off of glutamine without the presence of oxygen or carbohydrates or glucose. That's a very important key piece of information. And I do think that the absence of eggs had a lot more to do than with avian bird flu. I think everybody knows that, you know. So we are heading into a long carnivore bout, and we'll see what kind of footage we can do. And my training is on a whole nother scale now that I have the TRX. I'm able to work all the areas, all the core areas that I wasn't hitting before. Like, I'm able to hit some really good exercise full on high intensity muscle tension exercise routines that I wasn't able to get prior to. It's nice to not have to go to the gym to do that, to where you're competing for equipment, you're arguing with crazy people. I mean, it's just a bad situation all around. I think at this point, pulling away from those social situations where you never know what's going to happen and doing things at home is the trend. The trend can be your friend. All right, my friends.